I was 23 when I learned the shape of silence. It wasn't the quiet kind that lets you think. It was the airless pause after a door handle turns and a laugh that shouldn't be there floats through your living room like a trespasser wearing perfume. My name is Sarah. And the night I came home early, rain clinging to my hair, I met a version of myself I didn't recognize, one who stood at the threshold of my own bedroom with a grocery bag cutting into my fingers, while my boyfriend Tom whispered a stranger's name into the pillow we picked out together. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. The world narrowed to the threat of my breath as the stranger scrambled for her clothes and Tom's mouth kept moving like a television on mute. Sorry, not what you think. A flurry of syllables that didn't land. I set the bag on the dresser, took one apple out, and left. Outside, the rain made tiny needles of light under the street lamps, and I walked until the city lost its edges and my skin burned cold. People talk about heartbreak like it's a single event, a snap. But it's slower, like a rope fraying one invisible fiber at a time. And you only notice when you realize the fall already happened, and you're still midair, waiting to hit. I slept at my friend Maya's that night, or at least I laid in her guest room pretending to sleep, listening to the refrigerator hum and the bones inside my chest rearrange into something sharper. Tom texted, "We need to talk." Tom texted, "It was stupid, I was drunk." Tom called until 3 in the morning, and I watched the phone strobe across the ceiling like a lighthouse keeping me from shore I wasn't sure I wanted to reach anymore. Morning came harsh and yellow. I brushed my teeth until my gums bled, showered until the water ran cold, and went back to the apartment because a part of me needed to see if the place itself would flinch. It didn't. The mirror still had that crack in the corner we kept promising to fix, and our plant, his plant, really drooped theatrically as if it were auditioning for the role of victim.com. He was there, contrite, overcaffeinated, wearing the sweatshirt I bought him for his birthday, and the sight of it on him made my stomach tilt. "It was a mistake," he said. "It meant nothing." I looked at him, and the strange calm in my chest surprised me. "It meant something to me," I said, and he winced like I'd pressed a bruise. People will tell you forgiveness is freedom. Sometimes it's a trapdoor. The week after, I did normal things like a stunt double wearing my face. I went to work. I answered emails. I bought detergent. I also cried on the floor in the hallway between our kitchen and the bathroom because that's where my knees gave out one afternoon and I didn't have the energy to choose somewhere more poetic. In those days, pain was a room with no windows, and the only thing that kept me from panicking was the list-making voice in my head that had always helped me survive exams and rent and holidays with relatives who weaponized small talk. It whispered, "Inventory the damage." It whispered, "Find the edges." I started with her name, Laura. I found it in a notification Tom forgot to clear, a cheerful calendared reminder he'd created for himself like an idiot, lunch W Laura, as if betrayal were a dentist appointment. The emoji felt like a slap. I didn't call her. Not yet. I gathered facts like pins on a map. She worked at Tom's office in marketing. I scrolled far enough to see they'd started flirting months ago, disguised as collaboration, which I guess is a synonym if your soul is cheap. I saw the compliments about her creative brain, the clapping hand emojis, the casual "oh, you're bad" that repeats until it stops sounding like a joke. I didn't confront him, not properly, not then. I apologized to the part of me that still believed in us. And I made a plan, slowly, like learning a complicated recipe. Step 1 was something an older woman once told me at a cafe when she overheard me crying on the phone about a different boy. She leaned over and said, "Don't bleed where they can see." It sounded cruel then, but it was medicine now. I iced my face, learned to breathe through the tightness, and when Tom suggested we work on us, I nodded and said, "Okay, let's try." He exhaled like I'd handed him a reprieve. Forgiveness became my camouflage. I agreed to date nights. I let him hold my hand. I stayed soft at the edges and crafted my words like gauze. Meanwhile, I took stock of the leverage I didn't know I had. He and I co-signed the lease. The utilities were in his name because the plan, his plan, was to feel more like a provider, which meant he absorbed responsibilities he didn't respect and left them on autopay. He also had a fragile kind of ambition the kind that looks shiny from the outside but is glued together with other people's attention. His team adored him. His boss needed him. His professional image was an ecosystem of polite exaggerations and the promise of a promotion this quarter if he could land a particular client whose contract was, rumor had it, ready to sign. I listened. I watched. I helped him practice his pitch because I am not stupid and because there is a kind of power in knowing a thing well enough to destroy it. I also found Laura's Instagram, where every third photo looked like it had been taken by a boyfriend. The angles were affectionate. The captions were a thesis in coyness. She posted an artful shot of a hand on a cocktail glass at the exact bar I knew Tom liked, and my vision went sharp, almost comic strip crisp. Anger can be loud. Mine became precise. I messaged her from my real account because I don't do ghosts. I wrote, "We should talk." She replied with a heart and a time and a place, like she'd been waiting to be cast as the star of her own disruption. We met in a cafe with plants hanging from the ceiling and the kind of music that pretends to be your friend. She was pretty in a way that worked hard under the surface. Everything about her said effort. Brows, nails, the calculated mess of hair that takes 30 minutes to perfect. She smiled the way people do when they're about to condescend. "I assume you want an apology," she said. "No," I said. "I want information." And I got it. Not because she owed me the truth, but because she wanted to win. She told me their history with the smug generosity of a victor, like confessing the details was a kindness. They'd kissed at the holiday party. They'd had lunch 3 times before anything real happened. She told me Tom had said we were complicated, which is the euphemism men use when they want a witness to their own cowardice. When she mentioned a private Slack channel he'd invited her to, something clicked. I asked for screenshots and she laughed. "What for?" "Souvenir," I said, and I let her think I was sentimental. She sent them because people like her can't resist proof of their desirability. It's their currency. That night, I forwarded the screenshots to an email account I'd created years ago and forgotten. I printed some out and slid them into a plain folder I kept tucked into the back of my closet, behind sweaters I never wore. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about rhythm. You have to wait until the audience stops clapping for the wrong person. In the meantime, I made small repairs. I went back to the gym, not because I wanted a revenge body, but because I wanted to own the way my heart beat again. I cooked. I read. I stopped drinking because I didn't like who I was on wine. And I needed my hands steady. Tom noticed, of course. He said, "You seem different." And I smiled like a secret and said, "I'm trying." And he kissed my forehead as if he'd just blessed me. Step 2 was the apartment. I wanted Tom to want me back so much the craving would hum in his teeth, because that desire was the wick I planned to light. I let him move his hoodie back to the chair he'd claimed, let him fill my evenings with his plans, and I let him believe we were building something again. Meanwhile, I spoke to our landlord about renewal. Quietly, separately. I signed my name with a steadiness that felt like building a bridge in secret. When Tom mentioned casually that he'd take care of it later, I nodded, knowing later was already gone. Step 3 was work. His big client presentation was on a Tuesday. I knew this because I highlighted it on our shared calendar in a color he never noticed I used for danger. He asked me to help him rehearse, and I did. Feeding him lines, adjusting his tone, watching his shoulders loosen as if I were handing him pieces of armor. He thanked me, kissed my cheek, said he didn't know what he'd do without me. The irony was a flavor I let dissolve slow on my tongue. The night before, I printed the Slack screenshots again, this time with context. Jokes that blurred boundaries. Inside references that excluded me. Late-night confessions typed when he thought I was asleep. I stapled them neatly, attached a cover sheet with his name, and slipped the packet into his boss's in-tray early the next morning, when the office was still stretching awake. I didn't linger. I walked out with a coffee cup in hand and a pulse like thunder. By noon, Tom texted me. "Everything okay?" By 1, he called twice. By 3, Maya sent me a message. "Girl, did you know?" With a link to a group chat buzzing about scandal, about disappointment, about unprofessional behavior. Tom came home at 5 looking like he'd been underwater all day. His eyes were red, his suit jacket limp, His voice cracked around the edges. "Did you—" he started, but couldn't finish. I tilted my head, folded laundry, said, "Rough day?" He stared like he was trying to solve a riddle written in a language he used to know. That night, he slept on the couch. Or maybe he just lay there staring at the ceiling. I didn't check. The next morning, he left early. No kiss, no coffee, no note. Step 4 was silence. I let him stew. He tried apologies, then explanations, then fury. He accused me of hacking him, of betrayal, of ruining his life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't admit anything. I simply let the weight of his own actions crush him, the way gravity always wins in the end. A week later, his belongings began to migrate. First his sneakers, then his books, then the framed poster he insisted on hanging in the living room, despite my protests. Each absence was a relief. Each cleared shelf was proof that the tide was receding. Laura vanished too. Her Instagram went private. Someone told Maya she quit the job. The ecosystem collapsed, as ecosystems do when the rot spreads faster than the roots can hold. When the lease renewal came in the mail, only my name was on it. I signed with a flourish. The apartment felt lighter, almost collaborative, like it finally chose me. Revenge doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's paperwork and patience. Sometimes it's walking through your own front door and knowing every corner belongs to you again. The night after Tom officially moved out, I lit a candle, poured tea, and sat cross-legged on the floor. The quiet was enormous. But this time it wasn't suffocating. It was spacious. It was mine. People will ask if I ever regretted it. I'll tell them no. I'll tell them the truth. I only regret not starting sooner, because the moment I stopped bleeding where he could see, the moment I stitched myself back together in secret, I became something stronger than the girl who walked in on betrayal. I became the woman who turned silence into strategy, who rewrote heartbreak into a prologue, who understood that sometimes justice wears the face of patience. And when I finally closed the folder of evidence, tucked it deep into my desk, and let the lock click, I smiled. Not because I was happy, exactly, but because the story was mine, and the ending, finally, belonged to me.